Hi, everybody. This is Lauren Baker, founder of Search Engine Journal. On today's SEJ show, with me today, I have Brent Ramos from Adswerve. How's it going, Brent?
Good, Lauren, man. Thanks for having me. Good, happy to be here.
Yeah, it's really a pleasure to have you on. And I'll let people trickle in the live feed today, but really excited to talk to you about the importance of first-party data and the possibility really of us losing a lot of the third-party data that we're getting through cookies on the Chrome browser moving forward. But before we get started with that discussion, how about if you tell us a little bit about yourself, Brent?
Yeah. So my name is Brent Ramos. I started off as a serial entrepreneur in San Francisco, which landed me squarely into brand and media for about 8 years into the ad tech space. So that's kind of where I kind of backed into it from an entrepreneurship viewpoint. And now I'm currently at my home at Adswerve, and I've been here for about the past 4 years, currently operating as the director of search. Um, Focus heavily on innovation and
Mm-hmm.
what we can do with it. Yeah.
Cool. And I hear at Adswerve you're a pretty big company as from a Google partner perspective as well. So like could you tell our listeners and viewers a little bit more about Adswerve, what you all do, what you specialize in, and then how you're heading. I was gonna say how you're staying ahead of the swerve, but that sounds a little bit cheesy. How you're staying ahead of the curve, so to speak.
That's right, man. You heard it here first from Lauren. We're staying ahead of the swerve. So yeah, Adswerve is the number one Google partner globally, and we're also number one in search specifically. So we operate squarely focused on most of the GMP stack, so the Google Marketing Platform. So DV360, SA360, and Campaign Manager. We also support GA360, and GA4 on the analytics side, and then as well as GCP, so the full suite of Google Cloud. We come at that from a consultancy and access standpoint, but we also have a whole host and suite of services and hands-on keyboard that we assist brands and agencies with.
Awesome. How busy
Yeah.
are you right now with the GA4 transition after their announcement the other week?
We've been busy. We've been busy
Yeah.
with that, but now we're getting even busier. So good things though. We're excited for GA4.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, yeah, and I have to ask, so the AdSwerve logo, that guy to your right, who exactly is that? Is that it looks like Socrates from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Yeah. So you're close, man. It's actually Thales, so another famous Greek. Thales was accredited as the first Greek to kind of use data to inform a hypothesis. So plants and growing, farming seasons, things of that nature. So, kind of speaking to our mission here over at AdSwerve is to be obsessed with data, but always inspired by that human spirit. And I just feel like I nailed that tagline right there.
They
But
did
that's
it.
exactly where it kind of comes from, a little personification with Thales back there to represent on that.
Amazing, amazing. So, yeah, let's get into the first party data. Like exactly what is first party data? What is it? And what are the differences you would say between first party data and then third party data?
Sure, sure. So first party data is, I think, the easiest way to describe it. It's a value exchange between the publisher or the platform itself and the actual customer or client or user. So it's that exchange. It's a very private exchange, and so that's really where the first party data component lies. When I'm talking about third party data, it's really talking about like tags or cookies that were placed outside of that conversation, that intimacy
Mhm.
between the publisher direct and the end consumer.
Got you. Got you.
Yeah.
So I know with SEJ, right? We do header bidding. So we have probably about 15 different ad networks competing at once for our display ad space. And they're dropping cookies left and right, right?
Mm,
Like when someone visits the site. And then, as we all know, as consumers, when we're bouncing around from site to site, we're getting targeted based upon our behavior, based upon our search history, based upon what we're liking, what we're swiping up on, even on like Instagram. And then we hit that on like on the desktop and cross device and everything else. So that's all powered by third party. Is that mostly powered by third party cookies?
yeah, a lot of it. There's a lot of other things that can happen within that conversation. So there's,
Mhm.
in the case of Google, there's signals and their own graph. So a lot of these platforms will have their own kind of their graphs and signals that become part of that equation. But as you just mentioned, I think we're a little bit shielded from it here on the search side of things, because search is kind of a natively opted in tactic by nature, as opposed to display where you're kind of having to push
Right.
audiences out. So we're a little bit more protected on the search side from that impact. But you're absolutely right, is that the cookies are still very, very prevalent, especially on the display side of things, and the pub side of things, to be able to get attribution and audience targeting. And that's really where we're going to start seeing the shift, as everyone can tell and hear in the headlines with first party data, the deprecation of cookies, and um, browsers like Chrome, Safari, Firefox are heading.
Yeah, and Google's been making this announcement for a while, right? And they've actually delayed it a couple of times. They seem to continuously punt the ball. Why do you think that is? And what exactly does the announcement mean? And this doesn't mean an end of third-party data as a whole. It means
Mm.
the end of third-party data as served within the Chrome browser, correct?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, third-party data will probably always exist in some sort of format to some sort of degree, and not all third-party data is bad. And first-party data is certainly not bad. In fact, it's required for a lot of daily things that us as consumers experience that we enjoy. So those first-party cookies will persist. It'll persist more than the third-party cookies will going forward, and that's really where the focus should be. But as far as why the push out, obviously I can't really speak to that from a full statement, but I can assume that it's just being responsible, by
Mhm.
allowing the rest of the global world to be able to start wrapping their heads around it. So if you're a firm or you're an agency currently, now is the time to continuously start thinking about how to get that first party data strategy up into the forefront, before they do pull the lever on that. And by pushing it out a year or two, I think is actually really responsible of them to do so, knowing that the majority of the world still exists on the Chrome browser as far as advertising goes. Anyway.
So, in terms of really securing your first party data and putting together a strategy behind that, like where's a place to begin, right? Like
Yeah.
where can the average publisher or advertiser or Shopify site begin with accumulating that?
It's a good question, and first party data exists in a lot of different streams. We like to kind of look at it as like three basic avenues for that. There's the clickstream data, which is like the clickstream that you're getting from your media. You have the on-site data, which is captured in things like GA4, GA360, or your on-site analytics. And then there's also the business side data, which is things that are captured in your CRM or on the business side, or offline data, loyalty programs, things of that nature. So all three of those streams represent different ways to collect that data. And depending on what kind of firm or agency you are, all of them are important, right? All of those touch points make up a full wholesome persona of what a real human being could look like, right? And so it's not a matter of how you collect it, but it's a matter of how you started and what are you doing to do that. The way that you want to think about doing that too is with an eye to activation. So I think in the past, people have always really talked about, it's like big data. Like we just get big data and we're just going to amass all these different data points from all over the place. But really, it's talking about thick data, and you really want to make that data thick and enriched. So it's not just about
Thick into thick data.
yeah, thick data. Go from big to
That'd
thick.
be an awesome like t-shirt just to wear around. Is that with two C's or is that a thick with a K?
Dude,
Like,
it's gotta be two C's.
oh,
Two
okay,
C's.
there
Thick
we
data. Trademark. You heard it right here live.
go.
Um, but yeah, I mean, you want to move from that mindset of amassing data points to using thick data that can actually be usable, right? And I think
Mhm.
that's a big problem with a lot of firms historically, is the idea of you have silo teams operating on business intelligence or maybe on analytics that are separate from the media teams, to be able to actually execute that within. It's really breaking down those silos to be able to understand how to take what was historically known as big data, taking to enrichment that can be used in real time, because humans are shifting their personas every single second.
Yeah.
Right? So data is a sunk cost if it's not active. Right? You need to be using that data as close to real time or near to real time as possible for it to actually be valid. And that's where that value exchange really becomes important, right? Because if the user is opting into your platforms to be used, they're essentially saying, I'm expressing value to be part of this, and I will give you my information first party to you in exchange to have a conversation that you'll be respectful of and be
Yeah.
responsible with that conversation. But again, it won't be able to be activated upon unless you can find a way to use that data close in your real time that's actually meaningful. And that's the hard part of going from big data to thick data, but it's definitely where firms should start making strategies around.
And what are the limitations, right? Because when I hear about this, the first thing I think of is, hey, maybe there'll be less remarketing. Maybe there'll be less annoying ads. Maybe the ads will be better targeted towards me. Maybe like maybe after I actually buy a product, I'll stop seeing ads for it that do a little bit more than just justifying the fact that I bought it, right? Like so where do you see that change, not just from a marketing perspective, but from a consumer perspective in their overall experience? You think there's going to be better targeted advertising within these core networks? Because also when I think of Google, like I think of Google Ads slash
Mm-hmm.
DoubleClick Exchange. I think of Microsoft. Microsoft's been buying up ad exchanges left and right recently as well, right? So are we going to see like competing ecosystems or competing platforms, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, maybe to an extent Safari? Like how does all of that work? And where do you see those changes happening?
That's a great question. So the beauty of it is that it's only going to force firms and agencies to become better storytellers. That's
Okay.
really that's really what the core component is, because they're going to be forced to be looking at all of these disparate data points joined together to create a better persona, which they can sell better stories against. And that is really what the beautiful part about it. Now is the people that are going to be executing all of these strategies, it becomes a little bit more nuanced because you have to figure out how to actually do it in real time. But from the consumer's point of view, they're going to be getting a better experience. They should be being able to have better conversations with their brands across all of the different touch points and channels in a
Mhm.
way that's responsible and it's appropriate and it's useful all at the same time. Right now, it's an assumption, right? A lot of the times, it's like a perceived a click or maybe a bounce rate on site is an assumption of a human, but we don't know for sure, and so it's closing that assumption and human gap. That's ideally what we're trying to do here with the first party data, and there's tons of ways to go about that we can maybe elaborate on in a little bit there. But essentially, that's the goal: close the assumption gap between the data model and the human model.
Got you. Got you. That's very interesting. So, Google making this announcement really got a lot of people talking, but Safari actually did this previously, right? Within the Safari browser. And I was doing some research, and, we tend to focus on Google Chrome, but Safari is the most used mobile browser there is, both like as a standalone browser and an in-app browser on Apple devices like iPhones, right?
Mhm.
So, uh, do you think people just don't think of Safari as being a browser? That they just pay more attention to Chrome or it's Google? Like, of course, when Google makes the news, it's a tsunami versus Safari. That's kind of like a ripple. But like, where do you think that? Like, why do you think not as many folks were paying as much attention when Safari made that change? And then why do you think so many on the Google side?
Yeah, I mean, so far, I mean, just looking at it from our perspective, at least here at Adswerve, we've definitely seen that the majority of our clients that we assist are more invested into Chrome as the
Hmm.
browser of choice. Yes, I think Safari is, as you just mentioned, is probably the top mobile browser because it's device specific. So if you're an iPhone user, you're going to get that browser out of the box. But when it comes to advertising and actually usage, we tend to see that people, and to the tune of about 65% or more, are still utilizing Google Chrome as the browser of choice. So when you kind of back out that rest of that 30% or so, you can kind of break it down to maybe some Safari, maybe there's some Firefox in there, and then the rest. And so when you look at it, that the splash as it comes from an advertising perspective, maybe it wasn't really that impactful enough, but it did inform what to expect when Google follows suit. And so I think it just wasn't a big enough splash to really cause a ruckus on the advertising and media analytics side, just because of the usage component. But it did inform a little bit of understanding of like, okay, now what can we expect when the rest of that 65% in the Google Chrome browser will follow suit. So I think there's like, a mismatch there between data of saying, yes, it's the top mobile browser, but it's just
Hmm.
because it's device specific out of the box on an iPhone doesn't mean that's actually being utilized the most in the field. And that goes hand in hand with what we're seeing as well, which is Chrome.
Cool. Yeah, I think you kind of summed it up with the browser of choice, right? I don't think too many people are like, "Hey, man, I'm gonna switch over my I'm gonna switch over my Google device over to be Safari because I love Safari so much," right? It just happens to
Right.
be there, and who's really going to go in their settings and set things up so when they click on an ad or whatever in Instagram, it's opening up within Chrome versus opening up within like the Safari default within Instagram. But it kind of got me thinking when you said browser of choice. Now there's also Brave's browser. There's multiple others on the market, and they're very privacy oriented as well, right? So, like, is that even something you're looking into? Or is it such a small percentage it doesn't really matter as much with your clients at the end of the day?
I mean, I'm always keeping my eyes open, Lauren, but for the most part, I'm still just heavily focused on the Google side of it because that's where the majority reside. But it is interesting to think that some of these newer browsers that are appearing might see an opportunity, right? They might see an opportunity with by leaning into the privacy component that they might be able to come into the field and kind of disrupt the field a little bit by being another voice for people to choose from. So I think it's great. It's great to have that, and definitely keeping my eyes out for it. But for the most part, especially in our industry, Google Chrome is foreseeable the main
Yeah.
browser of choice.
Yeah, but see that too from a search engine perspective. Like, it's nice to hear about all of these new like search engines launching these alternative search engines. But you know what? When you look at your data and you see who's actually referring customers that matter, I mean, DuckDuckGo's there, but that's
Yeah.
pretty much like being rehashed, right? So
Yeah.
it's like always Google or whatever DuckDuckGo, and there's like Eco Asia or Eco Asia that shows up, which I guess is just Google or Bing that helps you plant trees, and then like basically page 2, page 3, we see some of these alternative search engines. They're coming up, but it's taking time. It's taking time. So, in terms of first party data, like where is that held? Like who owns that? Like I know third party data, you're usually looking at, you're working with other companies, and that data is being stored somewhere else, or it's following people around. But with third party data, like I think of like newsletters, perhaps like
Mhm.
your email newsletter list as being something from an owned personal based first party data perspective. But where else is that being housed? Like how
Mhm.
do I keep that data in a vault, so to speak, from if I'm a publisher slash ecom slash website owner? Like what do I do there from a business perspective?
Yeah, no, this is a great transition over to the how, I think, and really the first party data should be owned business side, and that can come in the form of like data clean rooms, and we recommend GCP as kind of the cloud component to be able to host all of this within, but that should be owned business side, right? So all of that should be housed on the business side, not held in third party platforms or third party providers. That way, it remains secure, and it also remains squarely on the conversation between the business and the end consumers that are opting into it. So definitely within some sort of cloud component or CDP that resides business side or pub side.
Wow, crazy. By the way, we're getting spam right now in the comments big time by someone trying to by some ether oriented program. But I am seeing some comments coming in. So anyone who is currently watching right now, we have some folks from France that have chimed in, a lot of good compliments. But if you have any questions for Brent, go ahead and let us know and drop some while we're live. This is pretty interesting stuff. So what are some of the challenges behind owning and keeping that data that businesses should be aware of?
Um, there's a few there. So there's two sides to it. There's the technical side, and then I think there's just kind of the business piece to it all. The business side is that again, going back to the idea of breaking down business intelligence teams, analytics teams, and media teams to actually be unified as one core component. I think if you're still going to continue to operate those on the business side individually, you're going to run into the same problems of being able to amass data that you don't really have an idea of what to do with. And so I think the first challenge for most firms is to be able to break down those silos and then start coming up with a data strategy that can be useful to your core consumers. On the technical side, there's just things that you have to have in place. We recommend server-side GTMs or SGTM, or some sort of tagging device that resides on the business and server side. Um, your analytics, obviously, GA4, GA360, and then the correct tools that are durable enough to be able to go inside with those to actually deploy that data. GCP we're a big proponent of as well, to be able to do things like your advanced modeling, your identity joins, and all of that stuff as well. Again, all on the business side. And so there's just structural things that you should have in place, but the core component of it, you need to have the right humans in the room that are working together to be able to make sense of it all. And to me, on my end, that's what I consistently see as the biggest blocker.
Really interesting. So do you help to work on that plan and that strategy with your clients? Like, are you guys kind of going in? Because it sounds like you work with just about everything that's underneath, like the Google Cloud, Google Analytics, Google this, Google that components. So are you guys coming in also more so as business consultants with setting all of that up on the client side, more so than just running, campaigns or whatnot? Because it sounds like, I mean, when you said, there's that human component that can be a challenge. That's something that you really need for some deep consulting with, I would imagine.
Yeah, we definitely do, and we're passionate about it here on the Adswerve side because it's a topic we love, and so we'll come in, actually provision any instances or tools that need to be in place and consult on the data strategy, and then actually help with hands-on keyboard if there needs to be modeling or pipelines created, and consultancy on how to actually activate it back out to the different media channels. So yes, we absolutely do that. We love to do it, and it's a very topic I'm very passionate about myself. But we also do kind of come in depending on what the firm is comfortable with engaging with. So some firms actually have teams that are already in place. They have their own analytics team. Maybe they have a cloud and data science team already in place. We're just a
Right.
consultative voice, but we can always come in and augment that as well. So we'll kind of meet you where you want, but we certainly can do the work.
And do you have any I know we can't go through a case study right now, but do you have any examples of campaigns where you've been able to come in and really help them dramatically that you can share on the air?
Yeah, I think what we've done something recently for a large travel organization. It was actually recently published with Google as well, and this was all about understanding how to activate first party data within the realms of search, and then actually augment that out into other channels. And so
Mhm.
uh, the way to kind of go about something like this, and I'll just kind of give it from a high level here, is predictive lifetime value, or LTV modeling. And so it's
Mhm.
the idea of first understanding all these disparate data sources, right? So rather than optimizing to a click or optimizing to an event that happened on the website alone, we know that that's just like one fragment of an actual human. But if we
Yeah.
take these disparate data sources and now we're looking at the clicks, we're looking at bounce rate on that click, we're looking at their user journey, but then we're also looking at things like, oh, they visited the lounge on this day. They spent 30 minutes talking to the bartender about a drink that they love, and then they also they visited the site and they were in the shopping cart for 30 seconds but never bought, right, in the last 30 days. Like all of that, now that click is a lot more enriched. Now
Right.
that's going to be more valuable than the other person who maybe is part of the loyalty club, did click on a YouTube link, but then they bounce and they haven't ever been on the site back, and they've never
Right.
been to a lounge before. So it's something like that. It's like you want to bid down to them 1,000% at that time of auction, as opposed to the person that you do know did all of those things. You want to bid up maybe 1,000%. So now as a business, you're now being more responsible with budget, because you're aligning your investment against known users that are most important to you and that fragment of an auction, which sounds super complex, but it's definitely doable. And that's kind of the idea of first party data at its best.
I mean, now we're talking, right? Because like once you brought up lifetime value, right, and then like the ability to the customer that's hitting the potential customer, or the existing customer, really, that's hitting those data points, that's becoming more valuable to you, right? Or maybe they are part of a loyalty program, but they're not necessarily acting upon that loyalty program. Like all of that is fantastic to hear, and I'll tell you why. Because in the world of SEO, a lot of the times, I would say 90% plus of campaigns are based on that immediate direct response buy. You got this many people to the site, this many people bought, and Google has tracked this, or Google Analytics or whatever analytics platform has tracked this as being the revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and the story ends there most of the time, right? And there's a couple of apps out there that are really great for Shopify that can help you define that lifetime value, that can show the lifetime value of the user that's come from different advertising channels, different organic channels, and everything else, especially if you're adding things like subscribe and save, right? Recharge, whatever it can be. Then you can actually look at the true lifetime value of the user. And to your point, you can adjust your advertising or your messaging to that user based upon where they are, where they've been. If they are in your, so you had said like the Travelers Club or the Lounge or whatever. So I'm assuming that that could be possibly, an airline or a travel company, or maybe they're using their Amex Platinum card, and you can track it that way, whatever it may be. So that's an active user. They're actively traveling, they're actively spending, they're actively buying those drinks and those sandwiches or whatever it may be. And that all adds up over time. It also means they're probably going to be retained. They're not going to drop that next year. They're not going to be like, man, I'm not using that platinum Amex. It's not worth it because I didn't travel any last year. So I'm gonna switch, so that, right? So that's actually pretty awesome, not only from an acquisition standpoint, but a long-term retention standpoint. Because once you add lifetime value into the equation, no matter what the attribution channel, you're just talking a different language, which is like more so marketing than like the direct response that we're used to talking within SEO. So I love that. I love that. Do you work with most of your clients that way? And do you see that as being an advantage to having that first party data?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a new topic. I think it's kind of complex for
Mm-hmm.
people to still wrap their heads around. But for the ones that are available to have that conversation with us, it's absolutely a game changer, because obviously the margins on the search side, or whatever the tactic is, obviously will increase, because you're now being more responsible with that budget, and you're
Right.
on the user side, you're having more impactful conversations digitally than if you weren't that, if it wasn't known, right? So you're able to talk to them at the right time with the right content. So it's a win-win. Um, and every time we've implemented it, we only see greenfields start to arise. So it's that Pareto principle of the 80-20, and you're just being responsible with how you can actually go out and attack it. Um, so absolutely, for us here at Adswerve on the search side, we see it as the future of search, because the SERP is just going to get continuously more aggressive and
Right.
continuously more busy, especially with things like Shopify, right? Where they
Yeah.
make it so easy for makers of any level to start bidding almost immediately. It becomes so much more competitive. So the faster you can get first party data and lifetime value modeling embedded into your bids, the better you're going to be, and you won't have to worry about competition nearly as much when you know you can do that.
That's super cool. And my understanding is that you all work a lot on the Shopify side, correct?
Not so much on the Shopify side,
Mhm.
but almost kind of adjacent to it a little bit. But it's something, obviously, another channel that we're always monitoring, for sure. Um, Obviously, they just had the integration with Google, and you're able to kind of basically control your merchant center feed from
Yeah.
Shopify, serve on Google, have it come up into the SERP, which is huge especially for SMBs, and like I said, like makers and things like that. That historically it was too complex. Like, I go back 10 years when I was an entrepreneur just starting out, and I knew I had to be on there, but it was just too overwhelming for me. And now Shopify has made that a lot easier for SMBs starting out with. So
Yeah.
we're keeping an eye on it for sure.
It was really funny to see Google surfacing all of that right before the holidays too, right? Like,
Yeah.
it seemed like October, November, early December, not only just the paid merchant feeds, but also just like the organic products being surfaced in the results. You typically don't see that, and it was through the roof. Like I know that like with Merchant Center, the free clicks, they can be from ads or something or whatever it may be, but a lot of that we're seeing organic, like leading up in Q4. It was amazing to see. And if that's any indicator of what the future of Merchant Center is with Google, like I'm on board 100%. And then also within like the Merchant Center integration within local. which totally blows me away. And when it started, it seemed like such a difficult, complex initiative, right? To be able to see what you have in store in those specific areas. But it's something that Shopify has done a very good job of doing, especially if stores are utilizing their Shopify point of sale component within the store and syncing that up with it online. Then you can pretty much track anything. And with curbside pickup and BOPIS, buy online, pickup in store, it's all integrated into one ecosystem, right? Which is giving that data that we're used to seeing. It feels like things have gone full circle, because it used to be you would do advertising for a brick and mortar and you wouldn't know. Like someone might come in with a coupon or whatever it may be, and you could track it back, but you really didn't know. But online, that was a double-edged sword of your internet advertising, is people actually saw like the response, like what's the return, the ROAS of whatever they're doing online, that they, as opposed to offline. And so you're held to a higher accountability. And now it just feels like it's all coming back. So that offline, right, that integration with point of sale systems and everything else, where you can actually track that through Square or through Shopify or through whatever it may be. It's really exciting, because I mean, for me, it just means that, hey, I may have, I'm that person that just walked in and bought that car. Well, you know what? We hit them 2 months ago with this part of the messaging, right? So that shared attribution model across the board is super cool.
Yeah, it's getting easier and easier as technology continues to go with things like Shopify, and it's making it more accessible for people who aren't in the enterprise level, which is, it's a beautiful thing. I think they were really smart with how they did it with building out the platform in general, Shopify specifically, because they built it very, very flat, and then they created this beautiful partner ecosystem to come in and build apps and all these different things and tools to be able to support it, but still making an accessible platform for everyone. So I think it's really good. It's going to influence the SERP, but overall, it's a good thing to be able to allow businesses thrive at all the different levels. And historically, something that's just too complex to understand.
So we before we jumped on, we were talking a little bit about your history, and I think in the beginning we talked about this. You're in the Bay Area for years, and then now for the past 4 years you've been in Denver. How's the Denver tech advertising and search scene compared to Bay or compared to wherever? Like how thriving is it in the Denver area right now?
It's picking up a lot. I've only been out here for like the past 4 years, but even in that short amount of time, you've been able to see a big surge of tech companies out here, especially in performance marketing and agencies, particularly I think because of the exodus from the Bay Area, honestly, and things like that the pandemic kind of sparked. It just made it a little bit more easier to move. So either move home or move to other geos. And I personally have definitely felt a surge ever since that occurred. So you're seeing more and more of it come out in the Denver scene, so to speak. But you know, we're sitting here swerving at Adswerve, and we'll take it all. We'll love it all.
Just don't swerve too much to the right or the left.
Yeah.
Stay between the lines as much as you can. Awesome. Well, Brent, it's been really great getting to meet you and everything today. Just to let everybody know that's been on today's SEJ show. Yes, this video is going to be available and is available right now on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. I'd like to thank our sponsors, InMotion Hosting and SEMrush, for really making today's show possible. So I know most SEOs out there utilize SEMrush. If you don't, check them out right now immediately. Just go to semrush.com. And then InMotion Hosting has some really over the top, super fast, dedicated WordPress hosting solutions for anyone out there. So Brent, it's really been a pleasure. Is there anything else that you'd like to drop? Any other knowledge bombs that you'd like to drop on the Adswerve side, or anything that you guys are doing right now with first party data that's totally blowing people away?
Yeah, no, I mean, we're all about ideas. We love creating, we love building. So if you have a great idea that you want to bring to your firm, or if there's a business problem like lifetime value, bidding, or anything else in the search realm that you're interested in bringing to your group, let us know. We have a form on site, adswerve.com/search. Go ahead, hit that. And you can work with us as a consumer collaborator. We love working with people and hearing their ideas, everything from brand and colorways to actual technical alpha testers with us. Or you can actually submit an idea to us directly through there, and we'll reach out to see if we can make that dream come alive.
Cool. And what was that URL again?
Adswerve.com, and then /search if you want to go right to the search part.
Cool. I'm just going to drop that in the comments right now. Luckily, my keyboard is working again. So adswerve.com/search.
That's it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the time. Where can we find you online as well?
Man, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm active on Instagram. Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. So LinkedIn's probably going to be your best bet. Just Brent Ramos.
Okay, Brent. All right, man. Well, thanks so much for jumping on the show today. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate you taking that deep dive into what's happening in the world of first-party data, how that's going to affect marketers and just looking at that big picture. Because I don't know if you could tell or not, but that big picture lifetime value and everything else just really got me excited. I think that's something that we're always going to talk about. And then also, we have a question. Okay, here we go. You have any recommendations on how to improve keyword rankings for an e-commerce site? So what's someone can do right now? They've launched an e-commerce site. How can they improve their rankings? I think you kind of talked about Google Merchant Center a little bit. So would you suggest that they get involved on that side, or is there anything else from a fixed perspective without looking at the site?
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's a loaded question without knowing too much information, but all the standard search stuff kind of applies to this. So you're going to want to be able to do some keyword research first, and then understand your brand and see how you can differentiate at the brand and equity level. If you can come in just a little bit off scale or off center to what the other people that you're competing against in that SERP, you might have a better chance of actually showing up a little bit higher. And of course, there's always the bids. So you got to look at your bidding structure too, to see if you can actually pay to play to get that number one spot.
Very cool. Very cool. And I see Eric Lander chimed in. Appreciate the conversation today. Lauren and Brent, thanks for putting this on. Thank you, Eric. Eric's a longtime SEJ fan. Used to be one of the editors at SEJ back in the day.
Wow.
So thanks a lot for jumping on, Eric. Again, Brent, thank you. Thanks for taking the time today. Really appreciate it. We're going to be dropping the audio podcast next week, and it's only Tuesday, so it's not Friday yet. But hope you have a great rest of your week. And let me see if my trackpad is working. Yes, it is. So I'll talk to you later. And thanks again, Brent, for jumping on. Thank you for all of you who have attended today, and look forward to seeing you on next week's SEJ show.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Search Engine Journal Show. If you liked this episode, subscribe to our channel for so much more and click the notification bell so you don't miss a thing.